After surviving the console wars of the 1990s,
The Bit War veterans are invading your podcast
to bring you gaming intel.
and old tales.
Together, we are your hosts, Max Inventory
And Miao Te Ching. And we are the Bit
War Veterans!
Thank you for joining us on another episode of The Bit War Veterans.
Just in time for spring,
Spring has sprung.
and the gaming has just begun. March saw a lot of releases. Wait, when did Horizon Zero Dawn come out? Was that the end of February?
I don't know.
Well, whatever. People were playing it in March.
March saw a lot of exciting releases, such as the Wii. I was about to say the Wii U.
Yep, the Wii Switch.
The Wii
The Switch U.
Ah.
We're going to talk about some of those games today, but first we're going to cover a little bit of news.
After that, we're going to talk about one of the most exciting releases of March, Mass Effect Andromeda. No.
That's her Elcor voice.
Strained Reply. We'll be talking about one of the most anticipated games of March, Mass Effect Andromeda.
And then we're going to move right on to Game & Watch Radar. We've got two spicy new games cooking up for you. Another Sega Genesis / Mega Drive release is coming at you, named Paprium.
And a Metroid Castlevania type game called Bloodstained Ritual of the Night. Then we'll be reading tweets all about game guides.
Do you use them? Do you not use them? Did you used to buy them?
Are they
What are your favorites?
Are they a thing of the past, or do people still use them nowadays?
All that and more will be featured on the episode for your listening pleasure in this moment. Thank you for maintaining interest.
The Bit War veterans have a 21-gun salute to a fallen comrade, MadCatz. MadCatz is with us no longer. They have blessed us with mediocre third-party peripherals for many days and ages. But at the Battle of Rock Band 4, MadCatz has fallen.
Man down! There's
Yeah.
a cat down.
Yes, so MadCatz has officially filed for bankruptcy, and they're in the process of liquidating all of their assets.
MadCatz, we will miss you. Sometimes your products were pretty good, and sometimes they broke very quickly or didn't work right out the box.
Yeah, MadCatz had kind of a mixed, what is the word?
Didn't exactly have the best quality control.
Reputation, that's the word.
Or quality components.
Yeah, they always had kind of a mixed reputation, and that's probably what led to their demise, or at least people not being interested in buying their controllers anymore. Some of their stuff was good, and some of their stuff was known to break or just not work right. But yes, MadCatz is officially declaring bankruptcy, and this is all because of slumping sales within the last few years, and they kind of put all of their eggs in one basket with one final move to push out a whole bunch of Rock Band 4 peripherals. But Rock Band 4 missed their mark, and because of that, MadCatz missed their sales mark too. And that was enough to actually drag the entire company down.
And it's a shame because I like to see other companies produce controllers in competition with the first parties so they don't have this monopoly on being able to charge, $70, $80, $100, $120 for flipping controllers. There has to be an alternative for the financially disabled.
Or for people who just want a different type of controller.
Especially when you got children involved who break things, or pets or something. It's good to have controller competition so the first parties can't control their price.
Some third-party controllers are really good, and they do some cool stuff. But Yeah, MadCatz. No one wanted to buy the company. That was really surprising. So that's why they're completely out of the game now. Now, did you ever have any MadCatz products?
I'm quite positive I had a MadCatz Sega Genesis controller.
Was it okay?
Far as I remember, I had zero problems with it, and I'm sure somewhere along the way, I had a MadCatz original Xbox S controller, which, again, fine as far as I can remember.
I had it was either a PlayStation 1 or PlayStation 2 wireless controller from MadCatz, and it worked pretty good, especially considering how some early wireless controllers were not so good. And it was a bit smaller than the normal PlayStation controller, and that was good for my little girly fingers.
Do you remember, did it have the analog? Was that out by then?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So definitely probably was PlayStation 2.
Yeah, and then I had a MadCatz. It was one of the adapters where you could switch between different video game consoles.
Ah.
And I bet you it still works. So, MadCatz, I never had a bad MadCatz product. I only had 2 MadCatz things, though. But you will be missed, MadCatz.
Goodbye.
Hey, do you remember the game on GameCube, Die Hard Vendetta?
Nope. And neither do you.
I don't.
Because it really wasn't that good.
But there's a neat little backstory tied in with that.
There has been an uncovering of a Die Hard Nintendo 64 game that was never completed. Someone who used to work at the company shared some information and some screenshots and video gameplay of the game. It was being published by Fox Interactive in 1999. And the rumor has it that it was in development for longer than scheduled, and because it was going to be released at the very end of the N64 lifespan, they canceled the game instead and decided to start development on the GameCube game.
There's video of it being played, but I don't think he released the ROM publicly yet.
Right. He says that the ROM can't be played on just your typical emulator, but he's playing it through
An EverDrive.
Yes, he's playing it through an EverDrive.
And then this YouTube video of this pre-game build footage, they feature a couple of levels. Not all of them are populated with enemies. But there is some shootouts that can occur. And you get to do some neat stuff like dual-wielding guns, which was a big thing back then. And bullet time, some kind of bullet time slowdown special power. I'm guessing similar to Max Payne.
Yes, you could go on YouTube and look up Die Hard N64 test play footage and just see one of the other N64 games that just never made it to light. There's actually quite a few third-party N64 games that were canceled for various reasons, but, it always makes me wonder, how much better would the N64 have been if a couple of these games saw the light of day?
It had a good library, and it probably could have been enhanced by a couple of those late canceled games, more so than the GameCube was enhanced by some of them being carried over.
Right.
How about Star Fox 2? I'm still got that in pre-order. The Secret of Mana on the Super Nintendo was originally called, and part of a Japanese series called Seiken Densetsu. And on the Nintendo Switch, there is a Seiken Densetsu collection coming.
Yeah, it's going to be out in Japan June 1st. And that's going to include 3 games, which is Final Fantasy Adventure, The Secret of Mana, and Seiken Densetsu 3. As of right now, there's no news about an international release. If you know Japanese, you could go ahead and buy that for your Switch.
Because, remember, the Switch is region-free, region lock-free. And you could even go into the foreign online gaming markets and purchase games digitally and download demos.
The Seiken Densetsu collection will have an extra save point feature where you could save and suspend your game that the original games don't have.
And maybe we'll get an English version. That would be fantastic. I would love to play Especially the third one was not released here, so that would be awesome.
That would be awesome. Or if worse comes to worse, a fan translation.
Well, they already exist for emulated versions, if you want to check those out.
I should. I never have.
Breaking news coming in. Oh, Nintendo.
I think they need an award for worst company decisions.
Goofiest company decisions.
Most inconsistent company decisions.
I mean, last episode we griped how these people have missed out on the opportunity to make a lot of money with the NES Classic Minis. Well, now they've completely canned that idea.
They don't want to make money at all. They have discontinued the NES Classic Minis.
They said, forget it.
Forget it. We don't want to print money anymore.
But for whatever reason, now they have announced
the Super Nintendo Mini Edition.
Wow.
We might get this by the end of this year.
What I never saw was a ironclad reason for why they discontinued the NES Mini Classic, and I have to assume that it had so many security vulnerabilities they just didn't like that people were changing it into completely different devices and doing things with it. And it's like, that's going to happen for anything. Anything. There are people who turn toasters into things they weren't meant to do. Like roasters.
Yeah, Nintendo wasn't very happy about all the people modding their classics. And I still don't know exactly why.
And they have that history of being anti-emulation, shutting down popular fan-made games. It's just weird.
I know, it's like Nintendo.
So prideful. That old Japanese pride or something.
It's that old Kyoto, old school company.
But for whatever reason, I guess, maybe they're going to make the SNES Classic less vulnerable, but guess what? People are still going to do whatever they want with it.
Exactly. So
I mean, if you're going to make a limited run, then just say that. This is a collector's thing. We're only going to make 800,000 whatever these things.
800,000. You mean 8?
Yeah, I know.
I think they only ever made 8.
Well, go ahead. Tell the people, what did you tweet when you heard this announcement?
Nintendo announces the Super Nintendo Mini Edition, and they're only ever going to make 10 of them, and they're all going to end up on eBay being sold by scalpers.
For $900.
Which, by the way, as soon as Nintendo said they were discontinuing the NES Classic Mini Editions, scalpers on eBay jacked up their prices. Like, I think it was going for like $360 the last time I checked. For one $60 toy.
At this point, just forget it. You're not getting one. And don't give in to those guys. Unless you really got money to burn and you don't care. But at that point, I mean, come on. Couldn't you have your own made for you?
Yeah, we went through the route of buying a Raspberry Pi and making a Retro Pi, as we talked about on the last episode.
So check that out. Maybe you'll get some ideas if you want to make one of your own things. Just Google it up. There's plenty of videos and articles, especially after they announced the canceled NES Mini Classic. There's people who are more than willing to show you how to make your own. Bigger, better, faster, stronger. So thank you, Nintendo. You guys are really weird over there. Really, really weird. GameStop, look out. They're investigating the possibility that hackers may have stolen credit card and customer information from its website. They're estimating possibly between the time of September of last year and February of this year. And one of the interesting aspects to this is they were able to take some of those, those 3 little numbers on the back of your card they ask for. And these companies don't store that information, so they would have had to have intercepted them somewhere in the transaction. So that's this could be some really sophisticated, villains we got here.
Cyber hackers on the internet.
Cyber villains. I think superheroes need to move into this next realm. And, you could say the Matrix was ahead of it. But the next round of superheroes will be cyber superheroes. Watch.
400-pound hackers saving the day.
with this awesome avatar.
That reminds me, I had a dream about GameStop not too long ago. And it's kind of crazy because in the dream, I was walking through a GameStop with max inventory, and the shelves were all barren. Like, there was no promotions in the stores, no games on the shelves. It was getting cleaned out. And I asked the person who was working there what was going on, and they said they were closing down. So they really only had like one shelf of merchandise that was left. And I went and I looked, and it was a whole bunch of game guides, and they were discounted. I think I remember in the dream they were like $1.30 or something. It was like some random cheap amount like that. So I started looking through all the game guides, and I call Max Inventory over, and we're looking through the pile, and I remember finding a Soul Calibur art book that was discounted. And then I looked like in the back of something, you know, like how sometimes people will try to hide something in a store and they'll put it like in the very back of a shelf and behind different.
We find amiibos like that.
Yeah. So I remember looking back there and finding a Legend of Zelda guide, and it was like the special edition with the gold pages. That was weird because I had that dream, and that was a few days before GameStop announced that they would be closing about 150 to 200 stores. I just thought that was so...
Worldwide.
Yeah, worldwide. So I thought that was really odd. I had kind of like a premonition dream of GameStop closures.
The force is strong with this one.
Or maybe it was because I worked at a GameStop in the past that closed down.
Quantum entanglement.
I don't know. We're all in a loop here.
Perhaps you're quantum leaping. Like that dream we had when we were in 2003. So last bit of news I could find interesting in the last couple of days, weeks, whatevers. It seems EA, Electronic Arts, is is heavily investing in their Montreal space up there in our dear friends in Quebec. The announcement from the Quebec government yesterday says that they'll be expanding Montreal employee counts to an additional 500 jobs over the next decade. And it's not just about added jobs, but infrastructure and general industry goodwill.
General industry goodwill and EA. That does not compute.
And this favorable environment led to the positioning of Quebec as a leader in the video game industry and as an internationally recognized center of excellence. So it's almost like what? It's going to be the new Austin, Texas? The northern Silicon Valley?
Well, it makes me wonder if they are starting to hire in Quebec, in Montreal, because that's the studio that's made Mass Effect Andromeda.
That's right. They got about 3 studios currently up there in Montreal. Bioware, Montreal branch, is one of them. Motive Studios. And then some other studio that works on Frostbite engine stuff. So it's pretty interesting.
Especially considering the strained reception of Mass Effect Andromeda.
Oh, my friends. This is going to dovetail right into our review of the 4th installment in the Mass Effect franchise, an offshoot, not a direct sequel. Mass Effect Andromeda.
Now, we at the Bitwar veterans, I know this is a retro podcast, and you might be asking, why are we going to talk about Mass Effect Andromeda right now? But this is all because it ties in to the company Bioware. And Bioware started in the Bit Wars. And it's produced many, many beloved games. And we have to ask, how did such a great company, Bioware, get to the point of producing something like Mass Effect Andromeda? And then we're going to take a quick look back in time at Bioware, the company, and what happened when it was taken over by EA, Electronic Arts.
Will they be dissolved like so many other developers EA has absorbed, like LucasArts, Maxis, Pandemic, Westward, Mythic, Black Box, and more?
Ouch. That hurts, hearing all those studio names and knowing that they're being devoured by Electronic Arts.
Sims sure ain't what it used to be.
No.
And neither is Mass Effect, if you were to judge it by the standard that was set by its predecessors.
So hold on tight.
Buckle up and prepare for faster-than-light travel.
Pew, 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 pew.
Oh, boy.
On the USS Normandy. It's not the Normandy in Andromeda, is it? No.
No, it's the Tempest.
The Normandy, the Tempest.
Mass Effect Andromeda.
Andromeda.
So without getting into too many spoilers or details, let's just do the bottom line. What is the bottom line here?
We are going to the bottom line at the top of the segment.
I like Mass Effect Andromeda just enough to justify my $43 I spent on it. Any more than that would be too much to ask for me at this point in the game.
So your bottom line is that as a brand new AAA title, not worth $60, but worth a sale buy or a bargain bin buy.
Yes, or in the future, once it has been patched several times and there's maybe bundled in DLC stuff, then it could possibly be worth $60.
Like a brand new Game of the Year edition or something.
Right. We've already seen a patch that has improved some quality of life aspects and improved some of the eyes in the animations. So hopefully that's a sign that they can continue making improvements to those aspects of the game that many people, including myself, were disappointed by. From here, I'm going to split into two, where as a Mass Effect fan, I was definitely let down in many aspects about this game. However, there are some excellent aspects that never got to be fully realized from the first game that were taken further in this game, but still, unfortunately, I feel fell short of the mark. From an outsider, a newcomer to the franchise, I would probably appreciate this game more not having the previous trilogy to compare it to. But at the same time, I can still acknowledge that this storyline's not so bad, but presented kind of a cheesy way. And definitely some weird game glitches, as you have seen when you've witnessed me play here. But still, it's overall an above average game that an RPG action adventure fan could potentially get reasonably lost in and spend 60 to 100 hours pretty easily, especially if you really appreciate the sci-fi slant on everything.
Now let me tell you my tales. Now I'm coming from a different perspective of not being as much of a Mass Effect fan. Not that I don't like the series, it's just I've only played number 1.
And in comparison to me, I'm pretty diehard, and a couple of years back was a walking codex.
Right, you've played all of the Mass Effect games, like, 1, 2, 3.
All DLC.
All the DLC,
Several
multiple
times.
endings, multiple
Yep.
playthroughs, romance, all the romancings.
Most of them.
There's a couple you just don't want to do.
Yeah, of course, Plus, playing each game roughly 4 times each is a little excessive.
Do you think Mass Effect Andromeda will get 4 playthroughs?
From me, absolutely not. But there's a contrast to that. Because there is so much more content in this game, it has still garnered and has the potential to rack up more hours played. So if you can look at it that way. Because to me, in this game, a lot of elements that made Mass Effect replayable were stripped out. While at the same time, the trade-off for that is that there is a lot of content to do. And part of what can add to replayability in this game is if pretty much you don't 100% complete it. So then that way, when you play again, you can do different quests than you did the first time. And as well as make different choices. while there are very few seemingly critical choices to make. I've derailed you a bit. Now please go on. This is your perspective from only playing the first game, and I goaded you into playing the first 30 minutes of both Andromeda and Mass Effect 2.
Right, so as I was saying, played Mass Effect 1. I really enjoyed it, and it was just, I never got around to playing 2 or 3 in the Mass Effect series. Also played the first Dragon Age, and I really liked it. Same deal, just never got around to playing any of the sequels.
Same here, and that game definitely had bugs as well.
So here we are, Mass Effect Andromeda, and I play about the first half an hour or so of the game, and right off the bat, I am amazed at the limited character customization options and how they seem to have taken out completely Paragon Renegade and replaced it with some other speech system that doesn't seem to have much of an impact on anything.
No, after 70 plus hours play, I can tell you it doesn't add up to anything. It's a real missed opportunity.
And of course, everyone's heard of all of the crazy glitches and crazy animations that happen. And from watching you play, I've seen a ton of glitches and inconsistencies in the game. And for a game that's coming out in 2017, I don't think it looks good at all.
Unfinished, unpolished.
Yeah, so then I played the first half an hour of Mass Effect Andromeda. It wasn't terrible, but I wasn't really drawn into it. And eventually I got to a point in the game where there was a story cutscene. I entered a different area, and then I died, and the game put me back in a really far away autosave.
Probably 5 to 10 minutes. 10 minutes?
Oh, yeah, easy.
It was like 10 minutes, yeah.
Easily even more. Even more.
Yeah, it may have been.
Even more. And I was just, okay, I kind of felt a little bit done, and I'm like, I'll try Mass Effect 2 in comparison. Now, Mass Effect 2 came out, 10 years ago almost?
A little bit less. That was...
maybe 8 years?
That was 2010. 7 years ago.
Okay. So this is a game that came out 7 years ago from the same company, Bioware. And I start a new character, and instantly it was like, wow, the character creation is more in-depth than this one.
Even the very first game had more options in customizing your face shape and all those features.
Yeah, and then just in general, like faces and textures and lighting effects looked better in Mass Effect 2. Like there's something about Andromeda where there are a lot of lighting looks completely blown out and too shiny, and it's like washing away all the colors. It's like when games used to compensate and use a lunch.
That old NVIDIA bloom effect.
Yes.
Blurry bloom.
A lunch. I must be hungry.
And it's inconsistent, and it's not just my computer. We have watched footage from both PlayStation 4, Xbox One, Xbox One S, PlayStation 4 Pro, and other PCs. It's just unstable across all the builds, and it's almost like a roll of the dice.
So as I played Mass Effect 2 more, I was instantly drawn into the story. The characters were interesting. The dialogues were just better written, and I cared about these characters right off the bat. There were hooks about them right away. And the combat was much smoother. Like, I felt like the gun had more impact, and you could command your teammates in more complex ways right off the bat. And from my understanding, in Mass Effect Andromeda, they've stripped away a lot of the team squad combat.
You can focus fire and tell them where to go.
Yeah, that's not cool.
That's it. You can't customize what guns they have. You can, however, choose how their skill points are spent in their trees, but once you get to a certain level, you max them out because they're very small.
So I kept playing, and I really had fun, and I got to a point where it was about maybe a half an hour in, and I wanted to keep playing, but that was the main difference. I wanted to keep playing Mass Effect 2, a game that is 7 years old, that looks better, plays better, feels better, was written better, recorded better. Why is this old trilogy so much better?
Because the first two games were written by someone completely different as the lead writer. And what's interesting is the fella who took over and finished Mass Effect 3, who many people didn't like the ending and felt was full of a lot of fillery side missions, was also the lead writer for Mass Effect Andromeda, Mr. Mac Walters.
So what else was different about Andromeda, the development of it?
Ever since the Mass Effect series ended, and even after Dragon Age Inquisition came out, a lot of higher-ups in Bioware began to leave. And it seems Casey Hudson, who was the creator of Mass Effect, when he departed in 2014, he left the Bioware Montreal team with a decent launch pad of ideas. There was concept art, pre-game tech demos, and obviously a direction, which is evidenced by footage that you can search on YouTube from Comic-Con and E3 in 2014. I mean, there's footage of the Mako driving on planets that looks almost like how we have in the finished product. And after 70 plus hours of play, I can tell you this game unfortunately still comes off as pretty much like a fan-made game, like an amateurly made mod for an existing game. At its lows, it made me feel like a QA tester, and I should be paid to be playing this and reporting and writing reports on all the bugs and glitches I came across and changes that could be made.
Thank you for playing the beta.
And at its best, even, I feel like I'm playing a solid game set in the Mass Effect universe, but still needs maybe another year or two of development and work to be finished before release to the public. And I don't mean that just technical-wise, I also mean the story and the characterizations, which plays into why my joy and connection wasn't fully made with this game. The main character, to me, is a piece of cardboard. This is definitely no Commander Shepard. And I understand their logic of wanting to build a hero rather than start you off as pretty much a tough, heroic person. But instead what they have is pretty much like a quib machine, a snark machine. That's what all this person is, personality-wise. Furthermore, the character pretty much exists as a vessel for this AI program that you are bonded with through some good old science fiction magic. And it's the AI that does everything. The AI is named Sam. So we're going to call him Sam. He does everything. You interact with this technology that is left over from an ancient race. Wow, isn't that original? We'll get to that in a second. And it's the AI that does everything. And it's really a shame because I feel like I have almost no power in this game. I don't really do anything. This AI does everything for me. The few decisions you get to make, and making choices is a huge aspect of this game, is it not? That's part of why it's called Mass Effect, because your choices have a mass effect on the universe and your gameplay experience. And although I feel like there are definitely setups that can have, or hopefully will have, more payoffs and repercussions in future games if this has sequels, and if they include the save file upload feature that the previous games had, or maybe DLC packs and expansions for this game. But even in the previous games, those choices were very emotional. And there really weren't a whole lot of emotionally heavy choices here in this game, and their impact and consequences were not immediate. Some of them helped play into the ending and were kind of neat, but ultimately I just feel not nearly as fulfilled as the other Mass Effect games had left me.
Right, as I'm sitting here on my computer watching you play for however many hours I've done that, my response to what I'm seeing in the game is either like, oh, hey, pick that dialogue option because it sounds ridiculous. What are they going to say? Or, ha ha ha, look at that glitch. Did you just see that person freak out in the background over there? Ha ha ha.
Here's a nice example of bad dialogue. My two options were, I get shit done, or I keep my word. So I picked I get shit done, and what she said was, my personal code is, I got this.
It's like, why even have the dialogue options at all if that's what your character is going to say?
I'm stunned often at how ridiculous this character's lines are, because it feels like it is written by what a 17-year-old thinks a badass action star of a movie would say, and it's pretty ridiculous.
Listening and watching you play, and after playing like the first half an hour or so of the game, I feel like it's a complete pass for me. Like, I want to go back and play Mass Effect 2 and 3 and probably never touch Andromeda. That's Miao Te Ching's final line.
This game, I think, similar to No Man's Sky, could be better in a year. After a lot of patchwork, after updates, DLC, which will still be kind of a hard sell unless they are really packed with some serious story content, because there are also a lot of threads to the main storyline and the more serious subplots that are left undone as well, unanswered, unfulfilled, unlike the very first game, or many other games that are the first for their franchise, like Halo or the first Mass Effect. And I assume that that's why there are these leftover story threads, because they want this to be a series. And for me, the interest is barely there. And I absolutely would not pull the trigger until I saw even more post-release coverage than I did of Mass Effect Andromeda. But I would be definitely made more curious if I heard there was a shakeup over at Bioware Montreal, or if this game were given to an entirely different team with more experience. But maybe it's time to bring Mr. Drew Karpyshyn back, the lead writer of the first game and second. And speaking of writers, this game in its development had plenty of people come and go. Chris Schlurf worked on this game for about 5 months.
Wait, what's his name?
Chris Schlurf.
Wait, what? Chris who?
Schlurf.
Oh.
Schlerf. If that's not the way it's said, then I'm sorry for mispronouncing it.
That's what I do to my spaghetti. I schlurf my spaghetti.
Schlurf it. So this guy did some contract work on the storylines. I don't know what he wrote. There's no telling until, I don't know, I don't know if it breaks it down in the credits of the game. But still, we don't know exactly what writers worked on what. But I find it interesting that this guy also worked on Halo 4. And after he finished working on Andromeda, he went on to work for Destiny 2. Now, Halo 4 was another continuation of a franchise by a different team that I did not think was a successful transition.
Right. Halo 4 had a much more muddled storyline, and I've played all the Halo games too.
Well, to me, it didn't feel authentic to the established franchise, right? Isn't that kind of how we both came across feeling it?
Yeah, it just felt a little bit off.
Totally, the whole Forerunner thing. And that was concept art and also other aspects that played into that. But story was part of it.
And that's how I feel about Andromeda, just off.
Yes, and I find it interesting that this guy's fingerprints are on it as well.
And what does that say about Destiny 2? Is that going to be off?
Interesting. Well, it may not be off because they didn't really have a storyline to begin with.
Oh.
From what I could tell.
Well, that's why they like this guy.
But in the end, it is very obvious that this game comes across as different pieces made by different teams patchwork together without a strong enough cohesive leadership with a clear enough vision to drive it. And the game falls short of many of the ambitions it attempted to achieve, very similar to the very first Mass Effect, where, like the Mako, for instance, the car that you drive around, had some really funny physics, and the worlds that were not part of the main storyline were not very fun to explore and didn't have much going on. The planets in this game are more fun to explore, and the car is much more enjoyable to drive around, But unfortunately, the excitement kind of runs out very shortly, and there's just a lot of fillery side quests.
This is where I'm going to come in and say, when I played Mass Effect 1, the only Mass Effect game I've really played through, I felt very intrigued to go to the Citadel or wherever and ask just random people about all of their dialogue options and where they came from and do their little side missions. And I had a good time learning about all these alien cultures and doing all this extra content. And when I'm watching you play Mass Effect Andromeda, none of that seems interesting. None of it.
That is a strength where I see a newcomer could find more enjoyment in, whereas you and I are already familiar now with all of these races that are in the game. So someone else would have a little more enjoyment saying, what are these Krogan people, and asking all these questions. And
But they wouldn't get as good of an example if they played Andromeda first.
Very true. But this is also another problem. So if you have an established player base, all this stuff is old hat. So what do they have new to offer us? One new friendly race. I am sorry if that spoils things for you, but there is one friendly new race, one enemy new race, and one old dead race. I mean, come on. Are you kidding me? This is really funny to me that in watching some older like Mass Effect and Mass Effect 2 documentaries, I remember one of the creative people saying, you could not stop us from creating aliens, or something to that effect. That basically they were just always creating new aliens, and they had to rein in how many new aliens they were able to introduce in the games. So it's like, where are the aliens, man? One.
I guess the Andromeda team didn't have any new interns that summer or something. He's very passionate about Mass Effect.
I don't know.
In case you didn't realize.
Maybe it was too much, but I never feel connected to any of it.
It's hard to feel connected to it when the story is subpar, the characters are annoying, and there's just too many weird glitches that take you out of the game. Like, I love Bethesda games, and Bethesda games are glitchy. And I still think Mass Effect Andromeda has more glitches just in everyday playing it.
Right. Some of these were endearing, like just silly animations. Okay, they're funny to laugh at and all that. But when you're trying to have serious combat and dudes are floating around or inside of walls hitting you and you can't hit them, it becomes silly.
And sometimes it's very bad glitches that affect your gameplay, like being in a conversation and an enemy from the outside is still trying to shoot you and you don't have any other way to exit that conversation.
No, except skip through it as fast as you can. And I came across plenty of game-breaking bugs. It took a little while, and I thought I was actually in the clear, but it happened. It happened. Many a time where the game would freeze at... there's a couple loading screens it would freeze at. There were enemies that would smash me into the ground, and my character would be stuck in the ground, dead, not capable of doing anything, but the game not ending. Weird stuff like that, man. I already have 2 quests that are bugged out. One of them won't be completed, and the other one is completed but won't go off my tracker. And I don't know if that'll affect getting 100%, not that I really care that much, but that would definitely bug somebody who is trying to do that.
Let's go to the wrap-up.
The autosave system, like she mentioned before, just isn't frequent enough. And there are definitely a couple times where I died and lost. There was definitely one time, like half an hour of work. And that taught me to be just vigilant on constantly saving it myself. There's clunkiness to the UI, which makes it very unintuitive. There is a nice crafting system here. Overall, I feel like there's just too many items. And there needs to be a way to simplify some things that were done, quite frankly, a little bit better in the sequels in Mass Effect 2 and 3. But at the same time, I like that they've kept around more of the RPG stats and weapon upgrades and customization that the first game offered. So final verdict, I'm going to say buy on sale, and after it's been fixed a little bit, and maybe some bundled in DLC.
My final verdict is, if you're a little bit of a self-masochist, go ahead and buy it. But if you value your soul, skip out on it.
In a way, I wish they didn't fix the eyes and the animations, because for a while it was a selling point to me that this game was hilaribad and really funny to play and laugh at, like a B movie, like a mystery science theater thing. But that's also a shame for Mass Effect, and it deserves better. And I hope that the sequel can provide better, and more can be provided to the mystery of the Remnant that doesn't make them feel like a rehashed, reused, recycled plot element from the previous trilogy.
Oh, Bioware, how ye have fallen.
Bioware, since you were purchased by EA, your quality has definitely shifted, some in good ways and some in not so good ways. Dragon Age Inquisition, which released a few years back, also on the Frostbite engine, kind of divided fans of the Dragon Age series. Now, I never played it, and in fact, Mass Effect Andromeda gets a lot of comparison to it. But I could say Andromeda does feel kind of like a game that should have come out in 2014 or 15.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like a game that should be coming out in 2017. It was like going back in time and playing something from the Xbox 360 era.
Yes, and it's really a shame that it had to come out in the comet trail of Zelda Breath of the Wild, which, as far as I am concerned, has now set the new standard for how open-world games need to approach their world building and puzzle building, exploration, and rewarding. In the history of Bioware, like we mentioned before, they really got put on the map with producing the Dungeons & Dragons Baldur's Gate series, Jade Empire,
Neverwinter
Nights, which is also, I think, roughly where Casey Hudson, the creator of Mass Effect, joined Bioware as a 3D artist who also had an engineering background. He also moved up in the ranks when they produced their smash hit Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic. I loved this game when it came out. Did you play it when it came out?
Nope. I missed out on that one when it came out. I was definitely into Baldur's Gate and Neverwinter Nights. Those were the games I played a lot that were BioWare related.
I had a friend who really loved Neverwinter Nights.
I was big into like Dungeons and Dragons, and Neverwinter Nights is basically Dungeons and Dragons. I didn't play Jade Empire either. That's one I missed out on. I never had an original Xbox.
Unfortunately, I never got to mess with any of those. But I love Knights of the Old Republic. And that's what inspired Casey Hudson to want to make their own IP for BioWare that would achieve a similar feeling of the vastness of the fully realized universe of Star Wars, of traveling to different planets, of having a ship with a crew, and using that dialogue options to have even more impact on the world and the galaxy and the politics that you were faced with in this new story. So after that success, he met with the two founders of BioWare, which were doctors, Ray and Greg, and he pitched the idea of Mass Effect and Mass Effect as a trilogy and some of the core concepts. They bought into it, and they gave him the green light. And I remember reading about the development of Mass Effect for the 360, especially being on the fence back then of, should I get a 360 or wait for PlayStation's new system? And, they spent roughly 1 year just on the world building of the different races, the cultures, the science of this future and all that. And I just find it so impressive. That's what sucked me in to Mass Effect, is how fully realized it is. Similar to the way of like a Star Wars, a Star Trek, a Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings.
And you could say that's the same thing about their Baldur's Gate and Neverwinter Nights games. They were very rich and fully realized world with great characters. And back then they didn't have fully voiced dialogue, but the dialogue options and the reading and the customization that you could do with your characters just heavily in depth, and a lot of thought was put into it. Like, you could tell this was a company where the employees really loved what they were working on, and you could tell because these games are still today held at such a high standard, and they really paved the way for other games of this type to come to the forefront.
So I really appreciate Casey Hudson and what he did for the Mass Effect series in creating it. It's one of those things that as soon as I played the game, I said, man, I am jealous. This is so genius, right? This is just an A-plus idea, and I was happy to see it follow through to the trilogy in the way that it was. However, maybe that third one could have been a little bit better. But nevertheless, it was an excellent journey. And I just wanted to say that in 2014, when Hudson departed BioWare, he said that he believed the next Mass Effect will redefine interactive entertainment. And it was well underway. Well, Casey, I'm sorry. I love you. I love your legacy. But Mass Effect Andromeda most certainly did not redefine interactive entertainment. However, it did help redefine new possibilities for the franchise.
In 2005, BioWare acquired Pandemic Studios.
Makers of the original Star Wars Battlefronts, the good ones.
And the Army Men series, published by 3DO.
Those games were wild. They were the, like, back then, they were like the Lego games of back then.
Yeah, you know, in a way they kind of were. Because they were shooter games, but they were still kind of fun for kids.
So they merged with Pandemic, and they announced Mass Effect was coming. But right after that,
trouble starts brewing.
The bear hug of merging with EA comes in.
On October 11th of 2007, it was official. EA was going to buy BioWare. I think it was something like $880 million.
Wow. It's a big penny. But they had just released Mass Effect, and it was a hit on the Xbox 360, PC later.
And EA saw a lot of potential with this company because they basically were top of the game since they came out with Baldur's Gate.
All those games that many of us refer to now as classics. And immediately after that Pan-BioWare EA merger, they released Sonic Chronicles for the DS, of all games for them to put out, which ended up being published by Sega.
It wasn't known as a great Sonic game, but it was a little bit better than some of the Sonic shovelware trash that was coming out at the time. So, all right, we'll give it to them, BioWare.
You did better than Sonic 06.
Well, after the success of Mass Effect, EA put BioWare in charge of a lot of different projects, including more of the Mass Effect series, Star Wars The Old Republic, and it became apparent that BioWare was going to have to expand. So in 2009, they opened up a brand new studio in Montreal, Canada.
To handle the overflow of taking on so many projects. On top of all that, they were merged with Mythic Studios, with BioWare taking leadership there, and out goes the now former head of Mythic. And at the time, they were putting out the Warhammer Online games, and after that merger, the Warhammer sequel, spin-off, whatever, called
Wrath of Heroes.
Called Wrath of Heroes, was completely nuked and never released to the public.
Canned after the beta.
But then they also released Dragon Age Origins for Xbox 360, PlayStation 3, and computers.
Computers. Yeah, I like that game. I don't feel like I need to revisit that one.
I owned a copy, and I ended up not finishing it because of a game-breaking glitch, or at least a main quest line-breaking glitch.
Ooh, ouch.
So I said, forget it. Too much time sunk. I'll come back to this later.
Then in 2010, BioWare comes out with Mass Effect 2 to much critical acclaim. And they also open up a new studio in Austin, Texas, and that studio was going to continue working on Star Wars The Old Republic MMO, and they would also do assets and help out the main studios with the flagship titles.
They were also working on an arena shooter that ended up being canceled, but it had some goofy commercials if you ever find them. Yeah, Shadow Realms, that's what it was. After some design and going into beta testing, it was determined the game pretty much just wasn't fun.
You know, that takes a lot for a company to spend years developing a game and play testing it and getting almost ready to release it and realizing that the play testers and the developers and all the employees just simply weren't having fun with it. And I mean, I'm glad they pulled the plug on it, because so many other companies would probably just say, yeah, and push it forward. So at least back when Shadow Realms was canceled, BioWare had a little bit of honor left. Then in 2012, there were some red flags coming up at the company. They announced the third installment of the Dragon Age series, and the very next day, two co-founders of BioWare,
Doctors Ray Mazika and Greg Zapchuk,
said that they were going to resign and pretty much retire from the gaming industry.
So the co-founders have left. Mass Effect 3 has come out. 2014, Casey Hudson, the creator of Mass Effect, pretty much announces the new Mass Effect sequel and their new IP that they're working on.
Basically, after EA buys them and does some mergers and expands BioWare, it takes a number of years for them to feel the effects of, I don't know, overexpansion, EA corporate oversight. Because what they came out with in 2017 is not the quality of BioWare that I once knew.
But that's the purpose of pointing out that it was the Montreal studio that made Andromeda. They were newbies, pretty much. They had never done a full game. From the studio's inception, they were set to handle overflow work, which means, just working on parts of games. Like they worked on the multiplayer component of Mass Effect 3. But I think that BioWare Austin has done a pretty good job with Star Wars The Old Republic Online, but the pay model system is where that all went awry, on top of it just feeling a little too late to the MMO game.
Yeah, a little bit of a botched launch, because I was there.
Both of us were there. We
yeah.
played the beta. We were able to play it fine on our computers. We get the game at midnight release. After hours of downloading, patch, and whatever, go to play, can't play. Graphics all over the place.
Yeah, on his computer, like everyone's face were really jaggedy polygons flying all over the place. And on my computer, it wasn't lag. It was running at steady 2 to 5 frames a second. When in the beta, it had just ran perfectly at 60 frames a second. This problem persisted for months until eventually they came around and fixed it. But I think a lot of player base bled out of that game.
Totally.
Before they really could have a good handle at it.
And they had gone to, I think, the free-to-play model even after you and I had stayed away for almost like an entire year and went back to it.
Right.
So it was odd. Just an odd experience, but actually playing the game, we had a blast.
Yeah.
At least going to the first level cap, or I don't know, the first expansion, whatever. And every now and then I want to go back.
True. It was a very fun game, and I just wish it had a bigger player base by the time we got around to playing it. And now I hear that they've shuttered a lot of their servers, and yeah, it's almost a dead MMO at this point.
Since then, the Edmonton branch has been working on a new IP game. Recently been trickling out some tidbits, like it should be released next year by like March or April. And they should be displaying it around E3 time at the EA Play event this year in like June or whatever it is.
Yes, June.
It's supposed to be really big, really awesome, have components of like Destiny and The Division in it.
Uh-oh.
Sci-fi. It's probably going to be the game I was hoping to get out of Mass Effect Andromeda, but we'll see.
Yeah, after Andromeda, anything that they do now, I'm just going to wait and see.
You're on the suspect list.
Oh, yes.
Another interesting point I thought I might want to bring up is that last year in about July, BioWare closed their forums. And if you go back and watch any of the Mass Effect behind-the-scene documentaries, the making ofs, some of their speeches, panels at Comic-Cons and whatnot, one of the things they constantly repeat is we look at the forums, we listen to the fans, we are always looking at what you guys are saying. And I find it really sad that we don't have that with Andromeda. And I almost wonder if they anticipated a lot of backlash for releasing, from what I can tell, an unfinished game. Do you think it had anything to do with not absorbing negative feedback from the game?
Maybe they were anticipating some backlash, or maybe that just kind of speaks to the general culture that was going on at EA at the time, and probably to this day. Maybe they're not really interested in your feedback and opinions as much anymore.
Yeah, maybe someone over there said, boy, we saw how they reacted to the end of Mass Effect 3. We played this game, and we don't want to deal with it. So shut it down. That's the feeling I get. I'm sorry. I don't know. That's the crazy man in me. Crazy Max inventory.
You never know what's in his pockets. Well, when Bioware comes out with a new IP, it's going to be a massive game, and it's, going to take multiple playthroughs to get everything, hundreds of hours. You know how Bioware games go. So, did you ever find yourself using a game guide to get through any of the Mass Effects, any of the Dragon Ages?
I did. For all 3 Mass Effects. Well, not the first time I played the first one. In both my first run-throughs of the second and third ones, I didn't really use the guides that much. I basically tried to only use them when I was in areas I knew I wouldn't be able to go back to make sure I got all the items. Otherwise, I did try to keep everything as, fresh and spoiler-free as I could.
Mm-hmm. So is that what you kind of do with game guides? You like to play the game, but you only look up what you need to on that first playthrough, and then maybe a second or third playthrough, you use the guide to get everything.
And that's our Twitter topic for you.
Game guides. Do you like them? Do you still use them? Are they relevant anymore? Is it cheating?
Or do you just use the internet? That's what we asked you, and now we're going to read your responses because you guys make this show more interesting and relevant.
These Twitter questions were from the end of March. So I know there's definitely a gap in time between you answering and me reading, but
it was a wild month.
It was a wild month.
Holiday, illness, work.
Breath of the Wild.
Breath of the Wild, Mass Effect Andromeda. March, I have sat on my butt the most in a while playing games, so I can have the best perspective or most insightful point of view when trying to relay my experiences with these games. And I'm pretty sure next episode we're going to sink our teeth more into Zelda Breath of the Wild, our experiences with it. But let's get into your replies. Starting with Pieces of Bits. He shared with us an image of his Link to the Past guide. And I remember this guide being for sale around that time. And it's very appropriate that Breath of the Wild was coming out when he posted that.
Definitely a good find.
I mean, it was a link to the past, eh?
So this was around the time when Nintendo Power was publishing their little mini game guides across many different Nintendo Power magazines. But also, we kind of saw the rise of third-party game guides. So we had things like Brady Games, Prima Games.
And the magazine companies would do their own guides as well. Sometimes GamePro did guides.
Yeah.
One magazine I read, Game Fan or Gamer Fan, they would produce some guides. I had their Resident Evil 2 guide, which was awesome because you could play the game from both Leon and Claire's perspective. The game guide was split in half, so when you turned it upside down on the reverse side, it would be Claire, and then you turn it over and it would be Leon.
That's a cool trick.
It had like a poster or a splash page in the middle separating them.
Mm-hmm.
Next up, we have
Chad Kennedy. Thanks for answering again. He says he collects game guides for games that he used to have in the past or for games that he still likes. But he really hasn't used a game guide since the internet.
So he likes the pretty pictures and the nostalgia feel of going through them. But when it comes to actually playing a game and reaching over on that shelf or reaching over to your phone, give me the phone.
I mean, these guides are definitely really cool to collect because sometimes this was the only place you could see some of the official artwork, especially before the internet.
And before all these pre-order bonuses, or a lot of times the cool Japanese games would have all that cool stuff, but you couldn't order it, or at least you couldn't read it and play it in your machine,
So
your console,
your machine.
your machine soul.
Yeah, so game guides were a way to get extra content about your game that you couldn't get normally, maybe in a magazine or from the official publications of the game.
Posters, cards, there could be all kinds of little goodies in there too, stickers.
Oh yeah, posters. So I remember buying Ocarina of Time guide. I had an official Nintendo guide, which I think was the Prima guide. And then I saw a different guide from Versus Books at a store. I bought this guide because it came with 2 really cool posters. And, they were the official artworks. You've seen it before. The one where there's, like, Hyrule Castle on one side, with, like, Link, adult Link, and child Link in the middle. And then you have, Ganon's castle on the other side. That was a cool poster. And then I had the other one where adult Link is in the Fire Temple, if you've seen that artwork. Ooh. And I remember buying this guide because I wanted those posters, and I already had a Zelda guide. But I ended up loving this guide. Like, I would take it with me on car trips and just read the guide. I had played the game many times, and I read the guide probably 5 times more. I just remember this little passage in the game guide. And, especially when you're a kid and you're kind of young, there's something like a game guide and it cusses. It's like, ooh, and you just think it's so cool. You got to show all your friends that this game guide has a cuss word in it.
Breaking the law.
Breaking the law. So it's that part when you're child Link and you go to Hyrule Castle for the first time and you have to pull the chicken out to wake up the dude on the side of the castle. I remember in the guide, it said, pull the chicken out of your inventory and wake his lazy ass up. Oh my goodness. Oof. That was so funny to me.
Ooh.
I just loved reading that guide. It had really cool artwork and posters and I still have it to this day. Yeah, amazing.
Funny story behind my Ocarina of Time guide. I didn't own a Nintendo 64, but around Thanksgiving time or something, I had a friend who had one who was going away for holiday. So I said, let me borrow it, and in exchange, I'll buy the guide so that way I could speed through the game while you're gone, and then you can keep the guide when you come back. And that deal worked. And I remember the guide, I'm not sure who made it, but I'm pretty sure it had like a gold foily reflective cover, embossed cover or something on it. It was a pretty good guide.
So next we have Game Changer Doc. Once again, thank you for writing in. You're someone who's been on the podcast a couple of times already now.
All of you so far.
Yeah, thanks. Awesome.
Thank you.
So he used to collect them, but he lost a lot of his collection due to weather damage. Ooh, yeah.
Water? Fire? Earthquake? Did the earth swallow them up?
He says he doesn't think they're very practical to buy now.
Kind of, yeah.
Once again, with the internet and just being able to look up things about games at your fingertips, if you don't want a big, hefty physical collection, then yeah, I guess it is better to go minimalist and digital.
Even back then, I wished there was a way to have videos instead of these ugly, low-resolution, sometimes black and white pictures. Do you remember, did you ever have guides that were in black and white? Ugh.
I had a Super Mario RPG Brady's game guide in black and white.
Ugh.
Yeah.
I hated them.
I mean, I was very thankful to have the game guide, but I also hated it was in black and white because I think like at the end of the game guide, it had a picture of every single enemy with their stats and stuff. And I'm like, oh, it would have been so much better in color. Oh. So we have Norin Rad 2 Turbo.
Oh, Norin Turin Rad Turbo. Thanks for writing in.
Nornrad Tuber. So he has 2 favorite game guides, and they are hardbound game guides made by Working Designs. I've never heard of Working Designs.
Are you kidding me? Working Designs is a company that like set the standard for game packaging and bundles.
Wow, I'm out of the loop.
Oh man, old school.
Jeez. Well, he has Lunar 2 and Vanguard Bandits.
I think these were Sega CD titles, maybe Dreamcast or Saturn. I mean,
He said, even though smartphones have taken place of game guides, there's something neat about having a guide in front of you when you're playing a game.
it's tactile. It's also fun when you have a navigator, a co-pilot, a buddy who's not in on playing the game, but in on helping you play the game. Maybe you're switching off.
That's a way you could introduce someone who maybe isn't a gamer to a game. Hey, have a look at this guide. And then pretty soon they're asking you, well, who is this? What is this cool character? Wow, this game looks pretty cool. Can I try it? And they feel maybe a little bit less intimidated because they know even if they're not that good, they have the game guide to help them.
Twitter user Alastor. Thank you for writing in. He says, I do still collect them because some of them are special. The Turok 2 guide comes in handy with the remaster now. Now that's a funny thing I didn't really think about. Re-released games. Are the old guides still relevant for them? Well, for the most part, they should be, right?
But I think if we were to pull out our old, like Ocarina of Time guides or Majora's Mask guides and play the 3DS remastered versions, they would probably be very close. I know they switched a few things around, but for the most part, the meat of the dungeons, they're the same. We have Death Star Slice.
Slice Star Death.
He says most of the game guides that he collected before the internet killed it. So it seems like a lot of people here are in consensus that the internet really killed game guides, right? And he says he loves the posters that used to come in those game guides.
Maybe they should just merge game guides with art books. Then you could charge double the price. Next tweet coming at us from Hairs59. Not the dirty one. Who also says, I used my mate's Final Fantasy VII guide as a coaster for my mug of tea. He wasn't happy at all. I hope it wasn't the same one I had with that nice white cover.
I would have reached my limit break.
Whoa! You would have omni-smashed.
Yeah.
My Final Fantasy VII guide was used so much that I'm pretty sure both covers came off. Probably a couple of pages. I definitely traced a lot of images out of that.
Next we have Twitter user, I'm going to butcher your name.
That's the name? Butcher name?
Bukyoku Elsara.
Well, the second part's easy. And what does Elsara have to say?
They have quite a bit of a game guide collection, including all of the collector's edition Zelda guides from Piggyback.
Ooh, Piggyback. Is that European or something? Piggyback Publishing. Don't set your mate's tea on the guides, please.
Next we have Shark Bread. Dun 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 dun.
I want to eat shark bread. Or does the shark bread eat you?
His favorite was the old Spyro the Dragon game guide.
I never had a Spyro game guide.
He calls him Spyro. I don't know why he calls it Spyro.
I don't know why he calls it Spyro.
He says it was super stylized and really cool looking. And after that, the next game guide he really used was one of the super thick game guides to help you get through one of Bethesda's games, especially Morrowind.
Morrowind, Oblivion. Wow, those are big games. I could totally see needing a guide for that, especially if time is of the essence. I think that's where the guide really comes into play. How much time do you really have to meander around to these games? Some people love this stuff. I love big games. But, as I've gotten older, there's just less time to play games. So as much as I want to play your big game, I don't have the time, man.
Sometimes you could just cut down on exploration and wandering around time. Let's flip to the game guide and find out exactly where I need to go. All right, go. So Jonathan Chapman, once again, thank you for writing in. I know you've done so a few times. He likes to read game guides as their own thing, like their own separate form of media or entertainment. He says he also uses them when he games sometimes, but like I said, I would take that Zelda guide with me on car trips and read it.
And I've done that myself. I've read the guide for a game I didn't own in the store just to get a feel for how the game might be. Game Lifter's up next. Thank you for your writings. He had a lot of fighting game guides from back in the day, with Mortal Kombat 2 being his most used guide. I completely understand that. I have a friend who's like a Rain Man with the special moves. Even 10 years after the game came out, the guy could still remember fatalities. It's ridiculous. I was horrible at remembering moves.
We got Longy Long, the ghetto gamer. And he shared a picture of how to win at Nintendo games. That series of books.
Wow, that's predating all the books we've just mentioned so far.
Mm-hmm. Before game guides were a big thing, sometimes you would get game books that would tell you how to get past certain hard parts. It would tell you some cheat codes. It might have a map, and they would be a collection of, maybe 30 of the top Nintendo games of that year, and they would just tell you a bunch of different secrets and strategies. And this was before games were kind of like big enough to warrant needing their own guides.
Or games that had passwords, where they would have the passwords there so you can get ahead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, cheat code guides were still a big thing up until probably PlayStation 2, Xbox era.
Definitely.
And after that, once again, the internet took over, and there's just been less cheat codes in games over time.
And games got bigger, arcade games kind of shrunk. It's all changed up.
And last, we have Ocarina of Dan. Once again, thank you. He still has his Final Fantasy X guide and his San Andreas guide. He says he thinks game guides are kind of irrelevant now after the invention of the internet.
Wow. I didn't know all you guys thought alike. But, yeah, you're pretty much correct.
So it seems that people kind of don't use them as much as they used to, and it seems like it's kind of gone to be more of a collector's item thing now, rather than a useful thing.
I still have a couple of guides lying around. So through time, just like the Final Fantasy VII and other Final Fantasy guides I've gotten, the artwork in them, they're inspiring, and being able to read the guide when you're not playing the game was a way of playing the game in your mind. Or reliving certain parts that you just loved.
Definitely.
I wish they could find new ways to keep them relevant rather than just abandoning the platform altogether.
I'm glad that large games still have releases of game guides, and they seem to be like these nice big hardcover things. Once again, I think they're kind of becoming more collector's items as well as informing.
And back in the day, I do think there were some services that sold VHS tapes that had recordings of walkthroughs through games or through certain parts of games.
Oh, and they had the tip lines.
Right. Oh, and call-in tip lines. Phone-in tip lines.
Oh,
wow.
Those were big, too.
Make sure you get your parents' permission.
It's only $5.99 per second.
They had some wild rates. I'm sure you spent that first, 60 minutes are free on hold. So that wraps it up for Twitter. If you would like to potentially be a part of a future show, hit us up. Follow us at BitWarVets on Twitter.
Or you could follow me personally and be a stalker. And follow me at MeowTeiChing on Twitter. All one word.
And I think that's all the time we have for it. Oh, wait a minute. Do you hear that? We almost forgot.
We got 2 new games, hot on our 6s.
So hold on to your 12s, because we're about to jump into some 1s and shoot up some 9s. Here comes the Game & Watch Radar.
We have Bloodstained, Ritual of the Night.
For all you Metroidvania fans.
I like how that's become its own genre now, Metroidvania, because we miss good Metroid games, and we miss good Castlevania games. So games like Bloodstained are there to take its place.
Now, who's involved with making this game?
It's being developed by Inti Creates and published by 505 Games. So it's being led by one of the former producers of Castlevania, Koji Igarashi,
Hi.
who worked for Konami from 2001 to 2010.
A Konami veteran.
So after leaving Konami, he created a Kickstarter for this game and was able to raise $5.5 million. Wow.
That's a big number. That's like ukulele numbers.
And former Konami composer Michiru Yamane, who has composed for Castlevania games in the past,
Hi.
is also on this project. Awesome.
Mm.
So if you look at gameplay footage of this game, you might think it actually is a Castlevania game.
It's pretty much like,
Yeah.
that spiritual successor.
Most
type.
definitely.
But I'm down for that because, well, they haven't been doing it, so.
Right. Konami seems to have gone off the deep end, so if we have some ex-Konami employees working on titles that are almost Konami titles, that's good in my book.
Just like I don't care if Death Stranding by Hideo Kojima is pretty much a reskin ideas that he had for Silent Hill. I don't care. They have flushed Silent Hill down the toilet over there, so go ahead, brother.
All the ex-employees get to show Konami who's really boss in the game industry.
Yeah, what they could do if, you let them, if y'all weren't run by demons over there.
It's coming out on PlayStation 4, Xbox One, the PlayStation Vita, and it was just recently announced the Nintendo Switch is picking up this title. Woo!
Hey, that means we'll get a chance to play it.
Mm-hmm. We will get a chance to play it in 2018.
Oh. But that's all right. It looks good. You can check it out if you just search Bloodstained Ritual of the Night.
Relive all that Castlevania glory.
The next game hot on the radar is another amazing Sega Genesis game.
What? You mean cartridge?
That's right.
What?
You are correct.
I could put this cartridge in my Sega Genesis and play it.
For seriously.
Oh my goodness.
And it is called Paprium. An amazing looking, super detailed, Streets of Rage style beat 'em up brawler game with an equally impressive killer soundtrack, complete in a case with a manual.
Just like the good old days. So it's developed by a company called Watermelon Games, and they've been developing it. It's a very small indie studio the past 4 years. So they're putting a lot of time and effort into this title.
And they had previously to that released an RPG for Sega Genesis.
The game is jam-packed with 24 levels. Ooh, that's a lot for a Sega Genesis game. It's going to use up all the Mega Drive pixels.
It sure is. It's packing a whole 80 megabyte cartridge. Could you imagine what they could have done back then with 80 megabyte cartridges? It was a big deal that like Final Fantasy VI was a 16 megabyte cartridge.
I know, and they're packing it all with 24 levels, 5 different playable characters, and you and your buddies could play co-op. You and your buddies could play at the same time. 2-player mode, and they said to expect plenty of different game modes.
And if you YouTube search Paprium, you will get an awesome trailer for this game that totally has that 90s Sega bad rad dude attitude, look and feel to it, and it's got amazing soundtrack. They've got a sampler of it on their website. Or you could also go to paprium.com, paprium.com.
So you could pre-order Paprium, the Classic Edition, which is $69.99 US dollars, and that is confirmed that game cartridge is region lock free. It can be played in a Sega Genesis or a Sega Mega Drive, or even a Japanese console. You have your limited editions, which runs at $99.99, and it looks like on their website, the European editions have been sold out.
Whoa.
They also have a Japanese edition, and an extra special arcade stick for $150.
This thing looks really cool, to be honest. I mean, it's a little too much for me, but you might be interested in it.
So if you want a brand new shiny arcade stick for your Sega Genesis or Mega Drive, look into this.
Or you could buy one and send it to us for a review. But I am loving this revival, this renaissance of programming for Sega Genesis games. Is anyone out there doing this for Super Nintendo games? Maybe I should research that before asking. But this is just really awesome. I love it. The idea of being able to add to your collection, having actual Genesis cartridges.
Yeah, and those great big boxes they come in. Like, good job, Sega, for making those big plastic cases. That really adds to a good Sega collection.
Look now how the SNES collection lines up with the Genesis collection. Genesis looks awesome. It was doing what Nintendo didn't, which was make awesome cases instead of cheap cardboard boxes.
So Paprium is supposed to be released September of this year.
Around time for my birthday. Bring it on.
Yeah, if you want to get Max inventory, something more for his inventory, this would be a good game to buy for him.
That arcade stick would fit well in my pocket. In my leather satchel.
In your bag of holding.
In my wool sack. Okay, all right. It's time to wrap this episode up.
Oh, yeah. Thank you for listening to another episode of The Bit War Veterans. We really appreciate it when you answer our questions.
When you tag us in silly things on Twitter, or your awesome collections or finds. Or maybe you'd like to shoot us some news articles or something you'd like for us to cover.
Yeah, we're always looking for suggestions for episode topics or Twitter topics. And of course, feedback is always appreciated.
Except when it's in a microphone. Thank you all. To you all, have a wonderful April, and we will see you...
in May.
What's going on in May?
Nothing.
I have no idea. I might lose my mind for Alien Covenant when that comes out. Who knows? We'll see if they take me away. Or burn me with their acid blood. But until then, you have a wonderful life. Be good. Be a paragon.
Or a renegade. Grr.
And we'll see you the next time on The Bit War Veterans!